a Netflix original film.
The Wi-Fi isn't working.
In the event of a global communications breakdown, do the following. Stay inside.
What just happened here is happening everywhere.
Avoid strangers.
We've all been deserted.
I don't trust them.
And most importantly, do not panic. Julia Roberts.
What happens next?
Mahershala Ali.
I knew something was coming.
Leave the World Behind. Rated R. In select theaters now and on Netflix December 8th.
Today on CityCast Denver, State Representative Tim Hernández went viral 6 weeks ago for comments he made about the Hamas attack on Israel, drawing criticism locally and nationally. But now, the 26-year-old lawmaker is out in the streets protesting again. We sat down last week ahead of the biggest Palestinian solidarity protest Denver has ever seen to talk about why. You should also know this is an explicit conversation. Today is Monday, December 4th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Tim Hernández, welcome back to CityCast Denver.
Orale. What's up, everybody? How you doing?
I'm good. I haven't talked to you in a while. I've been out. So.
I've been a little busy. So.
You've been a little bit busy.
You too.
Right.
You too,
but this is why we want to talk to you. You've been on the show for 2 years now. We started talking to you when you were a teacher. Mm-hmm. Now you're a state representative. And we wanted to catch up with you because our listeners have heard you here often and you've kind of been in the news a lot.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling okay. I think being in the news a lot is a good thing sometimes when we're advocating for issues that need attention, right? That our communities deserve having attention towards. I think the personal experience I've been having with media and press, especially since everything on October 7th, I think has been really heavy. I'm happy to walk through some of those details. It's really pushed me a lot. I'll say the biggest reflection that I walked away with was I was a grassroots organizer before I was ever elected. I'm still a grassroots organizer, right? And part of being a grassroots organizer is yelling as loud as we can so that everybody can look at our issues, so that we know that our issues are real, so that folks can participate and share that with us. And so it hopefully makes the news, right? To raise consciousness about our issues. And now whatever I say is the issue is the issue. And so being able to wield that position, I think is something I'm learning a lot from. And I think something that I don't think I was particularly prepared for, to be honest with you. So I'm sure we'll get into it and we'll talk about some protests that I've attended,
yes.
Which has drastically changed, right? I've been going to protests my entire life. And then all of a sudden I get a name badge, and when I go to a protest, it's on the news, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a different relationship. It's a heightened relationship. You're under a microscope. And I think that there's a real clear way that I think my generation, I think Black and brown folks, I think poor folks who are accessing these systems and interacting with them, I don't know if we've completely fleshed out how we navigate a relationship with both yet. Mm-hmm. But I'm okay trying to figure it out and failing on how I navigate both, because I do think that in order for political change to take place, our people, oppressed people, deserve the full set of options on the table. Sorry, I know I got in the water there. But.
You said something that you said earlier that it goes into my next question, which is like, you said, before I've always been organizing, I've always been going to protests, but that changed once I became a state legislator, how I was viewed, and that it was suddenly something on the news. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to talk about. So this video of you went viral, and can you give us sort of the too long didn't read version of what happened?
Yeah. So the events of October 7th took place. The day following, there was a protest called in solidarity with Palestinian folks. I've been deep with Palestinian folks in the past, and I had heard about the movement, and so I've been to Palestine protests before. I went in 2021 and have known folks for a long time, and so when it happened, I went. And I went because I had a conversation with some community members who asked me to go and said, look, what is going to happen in Palestine is going to be disproportionately worse for Palestinians than any of the events that are taking place on October 7th. And I went because I think it's the right thing to do, to stand in solidarity with grieving people, because there were Palestinians who were killed on October 7th too. And I went because I think standing in solidarity was important. And I think listening to impacted folks was really important at that time. And so I went to a protest for Palestine at the state capitol. It was probably the only time I ever wore a suit outside of the state capitol.
I did love that you wore Ben Davis to the state capitol.
Hey, we got some drip around
that's
here.
That's an OG look.
I went, and while we were, listening to speakers who were describing their fears about potential genocide in Palestine, speakers who were saying they were afraid for their family members, and speakers who were afraid that this would be the last time that Palestinians would ever exist on the earth. There was a man who approached the crowd and began yelling and spitting and interrupting the speakers, and in a really kind of violent and negative way. And I looked to some of the grassroots organizers, and folks were considering how they were going to approach him. And so I offered to intervene, because I don't think it should be the responsibility of mourning people to have to gatekeep their own space for their own mourning. I think it's inappropriate to interrupt and berate women when they're mourning on the steps of the state capitol for their people thousands of miles away. And so I went and had a conversation, and I had a conversation with him. His name was Russell, and I expressed to him that I didn't agree with the way that he was navigating the space, that I thought it was disrespectful, and I told it. And he said, "Well, who are you to tell me this?" I said, I'm a state legislator. My name is Tim Hernández, and he pulled his phone out and he started recording me and saying, "Well, do you condemn this, and this that's happening? And do you condemn what Hamas has done? And do you condemn this and this?" And I tried to remain on message, right? Of I'm here because I believe in the freedom and liberation of Palestinian people and the dignity of life for Palestinian people. I'll be real with you. At the end of the video, I got short and I got rude. Because I felt like it was an unproductive conversation. I intervened in the conversation at all because I've been trained in de-escalation and direct action, and so part of the training is to end the conversation. And so I sought to end the conversation, and unfortunately, that 12-second clip is the one that everybody saw, including a clip where I said, "You and the 3 people who watched this bullshit video." There's 10 million people who have seen the video now.
Holy cow. Well, I mean, that's just the reality, though, of when virality happens.
It's true.
You don't know who's going to see something. And I don't know.
And it was real bad. We're talking I'm 20 days into being a state legislator, right?
You identified yourself as such, which, I mean, I understand why you did, but also this is showing you're a different type of person within the protest now than you were, before you were in this position.
That's true. Yeah. And I identified myself as such because I think it was important to ground, right? That look, this isn't, I'm not necessarily here, to berate anybody or anything like that, but more so that, I think that standing in solidarity with folks who are mourning should not be a controversial opinion.
Yeah.
And I think I went and stood in solidarity because I believed it was the right thing to do. And I interacted with him and told him I was a state legislator because ultimately I thought that it would be a way to diffuse the conversation and de-escalate it in a way that would have been positive. Ultimately, he was de-escalated and he walked away and nobody was harmed. Later, the video goes viral and that's kind of where we're at.
And I think it's despicable what they're protesting for and what you're protesting for. And the fact that you can't condemn women and children and elderly people being murdered in the streets.
What about it?
Do you condemn it?
I already said.
Why can't you say yes?
Because I already gave you my answer.
You didn't give an answer. And I think anybody who would watch this would understand what your actual position is. 3 people that are going to watch
your bullshit video, Russell.
Mm-hmm.
This episode is brought to you by My Denver Therapy. My Denver Therapy is one of the largest woman and therapist-owned private practices in Colorado. Their therapists have helped thousands of clients throughout the Denver area using proven therapy methods that work. In-person therapy is available in Denver, Greenwood Village, and Lone Tree, all off I-25. But they do teletherapy too. Because they have a team of therapists, they match clients with a therapist who specializes in you, whether you're an adult, teen, couple, or family. My Denver Therapy is also one of the leading providers of ketamine-assisted therapy, EMDR, and internal family systems therapy in Colorado. To get matched with a therapist and schedule an appointment, visit mydenvertherapy.com or search My Denver Therapy to find a location near you. Oh, and as a special gift from us, you can mention CityCast to get $20 off your first session. Just visit mydenvertherapy.com. This episode is brought to you by the Denver Center for the Performing Arts. Because the DCPA Theater Company is back with Denver's beloved holiday tradition, A Christmas Carol. It is a joyous and opulent musical adaptation of Charles Dickens' classic ghost story, tracing curmudgeon Ebenezer Scrooge's triumphant overnight journey to redemption. Broadway World says this production is a, quote, splendidly festive tradition that illuminates the meaning of the holiday season in a way that has resonated for generations. It is a classic. It's the story that makes you think about why the Christmas season matters, and it's really about equal pay. Just kidding. Tickets range from $40 to $150, so come early and save. Don't miss a night filled with music, magic, and miracles. Live on stage at the Wolf Theater through December 24th. Tickets on sale now at denvercenter.org. So, like you said, 10 million people may have seen this video. It was clearly controversial. What happened afterward?
Yeah. So that protest was on a Saturday. On Monday, I got a phone call from House leadership, and they told me I would have to release a statement. And my gut reaction was no, only because I think pouring in, I do social media a lot, right? And sometimes I think pouring gasoline on a fire is not, this is October 9th, right? This is everybody, the Oakland Raiders and LeBron James and right, everybody's coming out with statements. And so I felt like it was not exactly the way that I thought was an appropriate way to advocate at the time. I thought listening to the direction of Palestinian people was how we should be going, and listening to the direction of all impacted people was how we should be going. And so they told me I needed to release a statement. And so I did. I wrote it up and sent it to House leadership. It was approved. And then I sent it out. The following day, I got a phone call that said, "Hey, Tim, we really care about you, but unfortunately, we're going to release a statement in about half an hour that's against you because your statement didn't stop the phone calls."
And this was who?
This is the House leadership.
Okay.
And so, I share this not to out anybody or anything like that, but because I think it's important to unpack how all of this happened to me. I'm in a good place with it, but I think it's important to be real, right? Because then following that, House leadership releases a statement against me saying we're disappointed that when Tim Hernández had the opportunity to condemn Hamas, he did not, and all these other pieces. And the video continues to go viral. And a lot of folks, start asking questions, and there's press stories running all over the place, right? In case we forgot, there was an entire school board race that was happening about 3 weeks out from when this was all happening. And there was stories about me on every single webpage, but there was nothing about a school board race that would impact 100,000 kids in DPS. And so I think there's a role to question about what press plays in advocacy and politics. But I do think, that the video going viral really pushed me into a different spot. A lot of impacted folks started calling me and saying, "Hey, look, obviously I understand, your politics and I understand, but I do think that there was some harm caused in the way that you treated this person. And we think you should apologize." And as I reflected, I did agree. That as an abolitionist, I believe that we're not exempt from harm. I think that anybody can cause harm. We live in a world not of limited resources, but of stratified resources. And so that means that harm is kind of inevitable for folks that don't have resources. And so it's not about necessarily, removing harm from ourselves, but about being willing to understand when we commit harm, apologize when we commit harm, and being willing to heal that. And so, at the end of that week, I released a video apologizing directly and saying, "Look, I caused some harm in the way that I treated this person, the way that I navigated online, and I'm really sorry. I definitely, I apologize for the harm that I caused. But I was very intentional in making sure that, I did not apologize for criticizing Israel. I did not apologize. No, I did not apologize for being critical of the living conditions that are taking place in Gaza. And that was really important to me, right? Because I think that there can be two truths at once. That, I was not proud of how I navigated the situation either, especially as somebody who understands power the way that I do, right? As a person in a position of political power, why would I ever treat somebody who does not hold political power like me in a way that harms them? That's against my politics. And so it was an important reflection point for me. I definitely, sat with it for a real long time. It was very emotional, and it was really fucking scary.
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, you say you're in a good place with it, which I hope that you are, but I also have to say, I read some really awful things about you online, and I also will just tell you, I have not been in nearly the same position as you, but I have been a target online, and it's a really lonely place because it feels like people don't know what you're experiencing. They're just piling on to a tweet, or you know what I mean? And so how did you navigate that?
It was awful. Colleagues I had never even met or talked to were releasing statements about me. That the House Republicans that are now my colleagues in the state legislature signed on to a letter calling for my expulsion from the state legislature, right? There are press outlets going crazy, and it broke national news, and all kinds of other folks became involved. Really, really wealthy folks in Colorado started to become very deeply invested in what my primary would look like.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is all while I'm taking on hundreds of death threats a day, right? Online, in my DMs, and all over the place, right? Sent to me at the Colorado State Capitol, and so it was really isolating. It was really scary. I was really kind of afraid to leave my house. I was, I'm never ashamed of what I believe. Do not misreceive me, right? But it is a different position when all of a sudden there's a very real threat for what you believe in this country.
Personal safety is not guaranteed, but it should be in some capacity where we shouldn't feel afraid to be at home because we have made a statement politically that people don't agree with.
Yeah. And
not to oversimplify it, but
and I'm empathetic. Don't get me wrong, right? This doesn't remove my empathy. I would have empathy for the folks who wish me harm because I know that it's from a place of hurt. But I also think, there comes a place that I think is really yet unnavigated in the way that our culture treats people who make mistakes. I think that this is not necessarily like a comment on cancel culture, right? I think fundamentally folks who are involved in any type of abolition work understand that cancel culture is pretty similar to carcerality in the way that it operates. It exists to kind of wrap somebody up and throw it away. And it's not to say that folks should be held accountable for what they do, and they should face repercussion if they caused harm, and they should not be exempt from an experience over something that they made decisions towards. I do think that accountability is still a really important part of the process. But I thought it was very interesting because the entire time I kept kind of asking myself the same question of who gives a damn what a Mexican thinks about Israel and Palestine that much, right? Like, to be completely honest with you, right? Like, some of my white colleagues were really, really concerned that I had this opinion when we have Palestinian folks who work with us in the legislature, and do they not understand that by condemning me and putting me in a place of harm inherently causes harm to folks who are much more in close proximity to impact in this direct issue, right? There's a real way that I think cultural violence operates, and I think for folks who are relatively privileged, who have never been on the side of this country that has ever experienced a call for justice that is not popular, I think that it's a really important, self-preservation politics that they play. And I think more importantly, that was a good reflection for me to have, right? Of, I was facing booze, and Palestinian women and children and men were facing bombs.
So going back to this position that you're in the State House, you've come under a lot of criticism, like you said, from colleagues you've maybe never interacted with prior to this, but they've called you to resign. You mentioned that some wealthy folks are putting some money up to challenge you in the primaries?
That's what some folks have told me, yeah.
Anything else you could say about that?
No.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Well, I just had to ask.
And I'll be real with you, and I'll say it at the risk of it having, any type of repercussion, right? I got a phone call from the Speaker about a week after everything took place, and we were having a conversation, and I told her I was going to be issuing an apology, and these were the steps I was going to be willing to take to work with my colleagues so that we could have, I could still be an effective legislator and all these other pieces. And I'll be real with you. The Speaker of the House, she asked me, when I asked her, what do you think I should do? Her first response was that you should consider resigning. And when my next question immediately was, out of the 65 members of our chamber, how many others have you asked to consider to resign? And she said, none. This is 30 days into me being a state legislator. I haven't even legislated a single day in my life. I haven't pulled a bill, haven't done anything, not even a special session. But I also, I spoke deeply with a lot of, Jewish folks in my district. I sat with a lot of Jewish leaders that I really deeply respect, and was very honest about my experience, about why I believe what I believe. And I also sat and listened to their experience and what they were living through that week. And have been living with, and I think that it's been something that I really have reflected on, and I think that it's much bigger than me, in my opinion. But I also think that my job is to represent the people that live in my neighborhood, and the folks in my community came and talked to me and sat down with me, and we arrived at a good place to be able to talk about the issue, to navigate it in an empathetic way for all the folks that I represent, and ways that I felt like still uphold the principles that I have as a person.
I have to ask, did you ever consider resigning after your own party or your own side of the aisle asked you to?
No. I was put in the House District 4 seat in the state legislature not by the Speaker of the House. I was not put there by my colleagues. I was put there by my neighborhood. And I represent my community over the interests of the Capitol. And I think that it was never a thought or a second beat for me. It was something that I think really caught me off guard, right? I thought eventually I'd be made into a boogeyman over like assault weapons or like something, like some other like far right group would get a hold of my beliefs and boogeyman me. And that's okay with me, right? But
it kind of already happened to you as a teacher in the public eye before.
Yeah. When we're confronting systems of oppression, it's never going to be popular, guys, right? Like, I hope we understand that. That's not like, oppression is a pretty popular thing in this country. And so I think we got to be real honest about folks who challenge that and the way that we treat it. If it comes to confronting the way that I think folks are marginalized, I'd rather not be popular. And that might play out very differently in June, right? I might be less popular than another person in June. But I don't think that as a politician, and I don't even like that word, as a policymaker, as a lawmaker homie, right, is the way that I talk about it. I don't think self-preservation should be the first conversation that we're having. I think the way we should be making decisions is around how can I best navigate the folks that I represent? How can I best listen to the folks that I represent? And ultimately, right, mandar obedeciendo, how can I lead at the will of my community? How can I listen and make decisions that my community feels affirmed by? And so resigning was never really in the books because, there was tough conversations I had with folks in my community who did bring up resigning. I also think that it was really important to name that the direct ask came from somebody who has no political power to remove me. The voters chose to put me in the seat of House District 4, and so I'm going to keep on listening to them if that's all right.
Representative Tim Hernández, thank you so much.
Thanks.
A note on the timeline from here. Tim Hernández was elected to fill the vacant seat representing Colorado House District 4 by the Vacancy Committee of the Colorado Democratic Party in August 2023. His term expires in 2024 when he will be up for re-election. After I spoke with Representative Hernández, we reached out to House Speaker Julie McCluskie for her response to his comments on being asked to resign. Her office sent us this statement. As I said publicly, I had several conversations with Representative Hernández in which I urged him to condemn the Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel. Following these conversations, I released a statement expressing my disappointment in the representative's initial reluctance to condemn the attack and for his promotion of offensive social media posts that appeared to support it. I appreciated his apology, and I know he is working hard to learn from his actions. Finally, I want to be clear that I never discussed electoral implications with Representative Hernández, and I don't know from where he heard that. I am not going to comment further on the specific details of private conversations that I have with members. We will post Representative McCluskie's full response in the show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell your favorite state representative about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See ya. This is like, I know I didn't want to be that kind of person where I was like, all this stuff happening that's really heavy is hard for me because this is my favorite time of year.